Hi there, just wanted to show you something that I just got in the mail and I wanted to unbox for you. It's a 1/10 scale Mendini by Cecilio child's violin. I just wanted to go over it and see what we've got here. I've already undone the tape, so let's just see what's in our box here. Okay, so it does have a hard shell case inside that has a sort of a cloth cover. Yeah, so it does say 1/10 right on this little thing here, this little tab. Just taking a quick look, it says Mendini by Cecilio on it, just on the case right here. It's got a back pocket here, nothing's in there yet. And here's an interesting thing, it doesn't have any latch on it, it just has this Velcro that holds it shut. And then it's got zippers. That works. I mean, initially the zippers should work fine. The downside, of course, with zippers is they do die eventually. And while the rest of the case may still be okay, the zippers could become problematic. And in that case, I guess you could attach some Velcro straps on it or something like that to hold it shut. Okay, so it looks as if we've got the interior of this case. These are typically made out of styrofoam and then covered in this sort of fuzzy faux velour kind of material. Just delving into how the case is made here. The white that you can see just by my thumb, that's the styrofoam that the case is made of, and then this sort of off-white color here, that's just a thin piece of wood, like I said, similar to what you would find in a Morocco clementine box, and that's there so that these screws that hold this protective cover on have something to screw into. But yeah, so you're not looking at a case that's terrifically made, but if you treat anything appropriately to its quality level, you can expect good results. Okay, so we've got a bow. This version came with the bow and also a shoulder rest. That was just in the box. I'll show you a little trick to these after for this scale of violin, for this smaller one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there we've got a 1/10 scale child's violin. The finish looks like a satin sort of finish as opposed to the high gloss finish that you've seen probably previously on violins. I hope you can see a little bit in this view that it is more of a satin finish. There are a few little flaws that you can see in the finish, a few little areas where it's either not quite even or there are little tiny divots out of it. My understanding is that it costs a little bit less to do a satin finish because it doesn't involve the same polishing. It's not quite as labor intensive that way. And it looks decent. Seagull guitars, the Canadian made one, I know some of those have satin finish as opposed to a high gloss, and they still sound fantastic. A friend of mine has one and uses it as his primary guitar, and this is a $300 guitar. One thing I should mention is the purfling on these is fake, of course. It's in a good instrument. All the striping around here is carved out and then inlaid, and that serves a purpose to allow the belly to vibrate better, but of course on these they don't do that. Just before I go on, this instrument here was $70 something, so including shipping we're talking about just over $100 for this instrument and the case and the bow and a few other little details. Here we've got a set of the Cecilio brand strings. We've also got a secondary bridge and rosin, so that comes in this little case here. I've seen before that these have been broken when they arrive, but oh no, happy surprise, that one's just fine. One tip, when you've got a new rosin, you can either spend 15-20 minutes rubbing the bow over it to get this sort of the high gloss sort of finish off and get it to really start adhering to the bow fibers, the horsehair, or you can rub it just lightly with some fine sandpaper, and you'll be so much better off. You'll be so much happier, because in 1-2 minutes you can achieve what it would have taken 15-20 minutes to do if you hadn't used the sandpaper. Just lightly scuff the surface just so that it's not such a high sheen, and so that well, in this one it said Cecilio on the bottom. As soon as you can't see that anymore because it's sort of translucent or opaque, then you should be able to rub the bowl across and you'll be much better off. So yeah, just taking a look at this instrument here, I can see, and I've seen this before actually with these, that the very edge there of the tailpiece, it's kind of a rough edge, and I guess that's just from where it was cast and then filed down, just where the pieces of the casting had been. But that has no real effect on the way it functions. Some aspects of this chin rest are a bit coarse. You can see here where some of the sanding isn't perfect, but it doesn't feel too bad, and I don't mind the shape of it myself, and I think the look is quite good. I should mention that this is not actually made of ebony, it's some other wood that's been painted, and in fact you can see here on the underside of the fingerboard, oh yeah, you can see a little bit of lighter colored wood. So this is not ebony, of course. It's some lighter, probably a little bit softer wood that they've used as an alternative, but you know, it's one of those things where as long as it works, it works. Ebony is usually the go-to wood for fingerboards, reason being it's so hard. The strings being pressed against it hundreds of thousands of times, it won't wear away or become misshapen and cause dead spots in areas where it where the strings vibrate against the wood. But you know what, for the amount that this is going to be used, this, whatever wood they've used, is probably going to be fine, at least for the time being. Just taking a look at this nut here. The nut is way too high. I don't know if you can see. Let's just show it to the camera here. The strings are much too high at the nut end. I don't think a child would be able to even press this down, especially not to do a semitone. It's really too high. So somebody would A, have to file this down, and B, the string spacing doesn't look too terrible, but it's a little bit too far in on both sides, especially well, actually both the E and the G string are too far in from the sides of the neck. Yeah, it always makes me wonder why quite a lot of precision goes into making an instrument like this, but they really don't seem to be able to get the nut decent. And so you can see here that the string spacing is not quite right. It's not evenly spaced between all the strings. Like the D and G string look as if they're a little bit further apart, and D a little bit closer, and E a little bit closer, and there's too much space on this side and too much space on this side. They should have just brought them out a little bit further. Yeah, so one of those funny things where this is not the first time I've seen this, where the majority of the instrument, they really got their precision down, but when it came to the nut, nope. It's important that they don't come quite to the edge, A, because you don't want the string going over the side when you put your finger on it, and B, because when you put your hand beside it, this fleshy part of the hand I find is very easy to touch against the string, and as soon as it does that, it won't make a sound anymore. Just a few more things I wanted to mention. The bridge on this is quite thick, so even though the height doesn't look too bad, and I'm not sure about the curvature, it looks to me as if there isn't quite enough curvature right here where the A, E, and D strings are, so it might actually be possible to play all three of those strings at once, and possibly the A, D, and G strings all at the same time, which is never what you want. You always want to be able to only play two strings max together at the same time. So that might need some work, and just the thickness there, it's just a really thick bridge. I think that'll prevent some resonance from going down, so that means that it will quiet it down. It's almost like having a mute in the bridge. When you put a mute on the bridge, that means adding some mass to the bridge, and that brings down the volume, and I think this bridge might do that on its own. So if I find that this is really excessively quiet, I might try filing down that bridge or sanding it down, trying to get some of that mass off there so that it transmits more of the vibrations through to the body of the instrument. So the back is quite nice looking. It's not, I don't know if it's book matched exactly, but it is a two-piece back, and it looks as if they've done a pretty decent job on that. And yeah, it's got, you know, a nice curvature to it, a nice sort of shape. The belly has the same sort of shape on this side. It looks quite nice. Just a quick look at the peg box. I don't see anything wrong there. It looks as though the pegs are making contact both on the peg side and on the opposite side. So that means that it should hold the string tension quite well. One thing I want to mention is that these strings here, if you do purchase one of these, you will want to replace them. Reason being, they are too thin for the scale of the instrument. It might be possible to get away with cheaper, thinner strings like this on a longer scale instrument, but on a smaller instrument like this, the reason that doesn't work is there are two ways that you can still get the right tone. One of them is to decrease the tension, and that means that the string will play the right note. The other is to increase the string mass, so basically use a thicker string. So usually on a 10th or 16th scale instrument, I find that all the strings are wound strings, meaning that it's a piece of wire and then it has a flat ribbon winding going around it. This one does not, so the E string is just a wire. That's all there is to it. There's no winding on it, so I think we're going to find that it's not possible to play this in tune. Reason being, the tension is so low that when these strings are bowed at a reasonable level, volume-wise, they'll probably go sharp. We'll just see. So there we got our G string sound. Oh, you heard that. The tone increased by at least a semitone. That should not happen. So if you do purchase one of these instruments, you are going to want to get either dominant, or there are other brands of strings that are from reputable manufacturers that you'd be able to make work on here. One thing I want to mention, sometimes the little clips here in the tailpiece, because the fine tuners are integrated into the tailpiece, sometimes these little clips are designed for the very small balls that come on cheaper strings, and they won't accept the larger balls that you'll find on, I guess, more reputable European manufacturers' strings like D'Addario or Dominant or Super Sensitive or any of those. So check the strings first before you purchase them, because you don't want to end up getting strings where the balls don't fit and then you wouldn't be able to use it. So on the interior it just says Mendini by Cecilio. Cecilio is kind of known for doing these budget-conscious instruments. And there are some things that they do quite well, and one of them is the finishes. Another is the pegs tend to fit quite nicely. It's got a really nice looking scroll. It looks as if there actually are some some little wood chips, I guess, that are stuck in the finish on there, but I mean the shape of the scroll is something nice looking. I know it's just cosmetic, but it's nice to have a decent looking scroll. Truth is, this violin would work just fine if I were to cut that off, but it wouldn't look so nice. Just noticed that there should be a little piece of cork in between this piece of metal and the violin body. There isn't one, and I might have to make these pieces of cork that you can see right there thicker. The reason is it looks as if the tailpiece could rub against the this sort of bridge of the chin rest, and if that happens, because there's a lot of vibration going through this, oh, it definitely is touching right now. If it rubs against there, then that could transfer some of the vibration and you'd get an annoying kind of sound. So yeah, we don't want that. Oh dear, I just noticed something. I'm not sure what happened here, but the side of the neck has a distinct ridge right here. I guess you can maybe just see it by the way that the light hits it. But yeah, there's a definite ridge that kind of goes along that's really odd feeling. And this is one of those things where I don't know whether I would address that and sort of try to sand it down to bring it down by the 16th of an inch that needs to be brought down to feel comfortable, because that would wreck the finish on it, and then I'd have to refinish it, and then it would have an obvious place where it's been refinished. So I don't know. Oh, here's something kind of funny. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but this line here is not vertical, and this one might not be as well. So it kind of is on a bit of a slant. So somebody made a little bit of a mistake when they were making this, but like I said, that shouldn't affect the sound. This one's on a bit of a slant this way too, so yeah, they just made a little bit of an error there when they were gluing the instrument together, but I don't, well, it obviously won't affect the sound particularly. And the truth of the matter is, for an instrument this size, unless you're working with a prodigy child like Sarah Chang, or you know, one of those kids who's able to just do incredible things on it, the purpose behind this is to get the ball rolling, teach the child rest position, teach the child playing position, teach them care of the instrument, making sure they don't drop it, and teaching them some basics like playing individual strings, how to loosen and tighten the bow. Oh yes, so that was actually the next point I wanted to make. Just looking at this bow. Okay, so supposing you do buy one of these and you get the stock bow with it, you might want to use that as a spare bow if you don't use it in a campfire. But this is really pretty intolerably bad. It's very sort of rough hewn. Where to start? I mean, this has a big, I can put my fingernail in between there. I can put my fingernail in this little crack here. The adjustment screw is somehow on an angle. The frog is not particularly well fitted to the stick, and it's sharp. That's like a little razor point right there. So not recommended. So yeah, maybe if you purchase one of these, keep this one as a spare in case somebody drops it. Bows can break pretty easily, especially if a kid, you know, drops it tip end down on a floor. This is a very this is a very weak point generally in a bow, but particularly on this one. You can see why. The thickness is about the same right until this point, and then suddenly it gets a lot thinner. It's as though this was made by somebody who had never really seen a good bow shape before, because it's really strange how it gets thin all of a sudden. Oh goodness, and this side it's all gouged. Like it looks as if somebody whittled this with their pocket knife. I don't know if you can see, but that's not at all smooth. You can see a gouge right of it right there. Oh, the frog's not much better though. I don't know if the tree had a knot in it or something right there, but there's definitely something wrong with the wood. Sometimes they'll have a chunk missing from the wood and either fill it with some glue and filler and paint and stuff. You can see right here, it's pretty uneven. It's just, if your child went to, say, a group class and they brought this bow along and they put it next to everybody else's bows, I think even a 5-year-old would be able to see the difference, and it'd be a bit embarrassing. It does have real horsehair on it. I don't think I've ever seen a bow this crooked before. Wow. That's almost impressive that it's that crooked. I don't know if you can see it better on this side. That's kind of amazing. The truth of the matter is, on a basic level, it will work. Oh, you know what? The reason it looks so crooked is because the frog can shift sideways. I'm not moving the stick at all. That's just the frog moving back and forth. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, the bow is still not straight, but it's not quite as bad as I thought it was. So let's tune this thing up and see how that sits, shall we? That's as in tune as it's going to get because, like I said, when you bow the string, the tone rises by a semitone. So what are you going to do? Oh, one thing I find is that, okay, these do not fit when you first buy them. So this is actually on its smallest setting. These are basically as close as they can go. I guess you can go a little bit smaller. But I'll show you a quick little trick to make it work. So if you find that you put this on the smallest setting and it doesn't fit, there's a trick to it. What you do is this little buckle can come off. You put it back again backwards. And now the thicker side is on this side of that little plastic post. And let's try to get on this side. Comes off. Now you're saying, well, now it won't work because these are backwards, but they spin around. So let's just spin that around. Actually, I guess this one could go the other way. There we go. Okay, now, so these are now closer together because of where they're situated on this little plastic post. Yeah, now it fits. Yeah, before I tried it on and it didn't, it was still too loose, and now it's okay. You may not end up using this at all with a child because, as you can see, it more than doubles the thickness of the instrument. Usually on an instrument like this, I put on a sponge, much, much thinner than this thing. Okay, I don't know which, usually there's a clear side that goes down lower than the other, and that's the side that your shoulder goes on, but this seems about equal. It's like a fake kun rest, K-U-N. Can I say fake? But they didn't observe the sort of contour of the kun rest. Okay, so here we go. It's hard to get a good bow hold on here because it's a bit weird. Even playing a tone up, like going from E to F sharp, or going from A to B, is really hard because the nut is so high that by the time you press the string down, you've actually gone up more than a tone. So you definitely couldn't do a semitone. That's me trying to do a semitone. That's just me pressing the string down to the fingerboard. So yeah, it's going to need some work. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Honestly, on an instrument this small, I can't use my fourth finger because it just doesn't bend around that way. But in terms of the tone, I'll put it this way. I've heard of lower costing instruments being called violin-shaped objects before, VSOs, and this is close, but I wouldn't go so far as to call it a violin-shaped object, which basically means it looks like a violin, but it actually cannot perform any of the duties that a violin ought to. And I don't feel that this is quite that bad. I think with a little bit of work and some new strings and some setting up, you could get it working decently well. Now here's the downside. The strings are going to be $15 to $17 each. The setup is going to be $50 to $100. So to get this playable is going to cost more than the instrument, and then you will also have to get another bow because it wouldn't be fair to a kid to make them play with this thing. It's not up to playable standard, honestly. The weight is going to be so wrong on it. It's just, if you got used to this, then I'm not sure it would develop good technique. There's so much wrong with it. Plus it's sharp. Like, I'm going to have to take this frog off if I'm ever going to use this, even for a backup, and file it. It's got some pretty sharp edges. So my final word on this is, this may serve this for a young child who is just starting out. If you can do some work on this either yourself, if you have any kind of luthier skills, or take it to a violin shop where they're able to do that kind of thing and get it operational, this could be a usable instrument. As it is right now, it's not. There's the only thing this would do for a child is frustrate them, because they would not be able to even play a semitone up from the open strings, and they wouldn't be able to bow the strings and get a decent sound. They'd never be able to play it in tune, and that would just be super frustrating. And if you're building that kind of frustration that early on, they're not going to stick with it. If you do go ahead and purchase one of these, just make sure that you have it set up properly, and bear in mind that the purchase price is not going to be your final price, because you're going to have that extra work done. There are some things on here, like I've said, that were done very well. The finish is nice. If you want to use this for a decoration, A+. It looks pretty good. If you want to use this just so that your child can learn not to drop it and how to hold it before you get a nice instrument, before you invest further, and just so that they can get a sense of what it feels like to hold it, what the general sort of weight is, how to put it in rest position, how to hold it nicely, how to make sure you always sort of treat it like a baby. Use two hands whenever possible, especially when you're a kid. My recommendation would be to take a look at some reputable string shops in your area, if you can find any, and take a look at what they have and what their cost is. And just remember that the end cost of this is going to be more than double if you have it set up by a reputable string shop. So don't think that you can get away with just spending $100 on one of these, because it won't work. And there you have it.
Thanks so much.